Hi, I'm Tony Saldana. Welcome to a video series on professional GBS. In this session, we will cover the professional GBS operating model. This is the first video in our Foundations module. And as a reminder, we recommend that you go through the 3 sessions of Foundation in sequence. Also, please cover the Foundation module before attempting any other module. Now, let's talk a little bit about the series. We're going to have a bunch of video clips that talk about professional GBS and what you can do to improve your capabilities and skill sets in running as well as operating professional GBS. There are 5 modules. We're going to start obviously with this one, the foundation. And in each of the modules, you will have several clips. You can take them at your own pace. So, hey, let's just go ahead and deep dive into the introduction to the GBS industry and GBS maturity models. In this clip, we'll provide context on what is happening to the GBS industry. This is an industry that's undergoing dramatic change. It's very exciting because it's transforming before our very eyes. And in this clip, we will share information about what is happening and what you need to do to acquire new skills and capabilities to be winning in this industry. The second thing we're going to do is talk about the 4 levels of maturity of GBS. GBS, again, has a wide variety of meanings depending on the maturity of the implementation. Everything from just pure cost reduction through consolidating of work all the way to becoming the digital transformation engine of the company. We will introduce the levels of maturity and share what you need to do to leapfrog capabilities. Let's start with a provocative statement. Is GBS still relevant, given all of the accomplishments of automation and the availability of low-cost global labor? Let's back up a little bit. GBS is roughly a 30-years-old industry, and there's still a lot of questions. What is exactly the value that GBS organizations bring to the party? Of course, there are a lot of governance issues because occasionally some of the work that GBS does seems to overlap with what other functions like HR or IT or supply chain or finance do. Of course, there's also challenges, especially in shared services centers, around attracting talent and retention rates. Attrition can be, as much as 15 to 20% in some local organizations. All of this results in some really good questions being asked about, can functions like finance or IT digitize without GBS? There is also some well-founded critique that GBS can sometimes be less than agile in the way it responds to new capability developments. Bring all of this together, and there is still a lot of noise out there on whether GBS and GBS as a model is still relevant. Well, fear not. The fact is, the GBS industry is not just alive and well, but it is one of the most important tools that is available to CEOs, CXOs, and boards of directors as they transform their company. The GBS industry itself is globally about $110 billion and growing at 17% a year. There are literally tens of millions of people all over the world and growing that are part of this industry. And so you bring all of this together, and it becomes really important for people like you and me to understand not just the context of what's happening to the industry, but also pick up new skills as we go about helping our leaders transform their individual companies. The challenge with GBS is that although the industry has been around only for a few decades, it keeps changing dramatically. When GBS was started about 30 years ago, it was all about reducing costs, especially the cost of labor. And if we continue down that path for too long, you get a problem of commoditization. You see, commoditization of an industry can actually make competition really, really difficult. So let's take GBS. If you specialize in only providing low-cost, cheap labor, there is going to be somebody else in another country, in another organization, another supplier that can actually do this cheaper than you can. Costs cannot be reduced forever. The other challenge is that for people like you and me that work in GBS, it's not very motivating to think of our job as constantly cost reduction. It's fine to obviously reduce cost as a challenge, but if that's all you do day in, day out, cut to the bone, it can be really demotivating. Put those two challenges together, and we must evolve constantly as an industry. So as you can tell, we have an evolution challenge in GBS. Given the fast pace of change in the industry, it's important to keep changing and changing dramatically. First, we have to prevent commoditization of our work. As mentioned earlier, if cost is the only thing that you're focused on, there is going to be somebody that comes in faster, cheaper than you can. Commoditized industries don't do well in the long term unless they innovate. So we have to go beyond cost and into innovation. The second challenge that we all face is that cost reduction does end up being the point of entry or the cost of entry into the GBS business. But service levels, the last mile of delivering good quality services, is absolutely critical. We cannot cut cost or innovate and add other value at the risk of limiting the services that we deliver. Now, you put all of these challenges together, and the only operating model that makes sense is to run GBS as if it were a business unit and not a function. What I mean by running GBS as a business unit is you have to pretend as if you were running an independent company, even though you're not, obviously. Within that, you are very careful to avoid monopolistic behaviors. Our job within GBS is not just to provide standards and to tell the users what they want. Our job within GBS is to listen to the users, listen to what the open market is saying, and to constantly evolve ourselves. All right, so let's dig deeper into this operating model of running as a business. Well, that's what brings you to the professional GBS house. The house is just a way we have organized the 5 modules that I talked about earlier. And as I mentioned, we're at the bottom there at the foundations. Foundations is where we provide you with information about the industry, about what other companies are doing, also about standards in terms of terminology and how to approach GBS itself as an organization. Upon that foundation, we have 3 different pillars. The first of these is called service management. Now, I talked a little while ago about running GBS as if it was a business. If you were a business, you would have products. And the concepts of product management, which we have changed a little bit because we're not in the product business, we're in the services business, and we call that service management. The pillar of service management gives you information about how to approach your services. Now, in our case, those services might be payroll or accounts payables or record to report or procurement. But nevertheless, they are services. And the whole idea of running each of those services as if it was a brand, as if it was a product, Who is my competition? What is my cost? How can I constantly innovate? Those are some of the capabilities that you will learn about in the module called Service Management. The middle pillar is operations management, and arguably, this is the pillar which most GBS people are familiar with. This is the come-from state of GBS. Running operations day in, day out, delivering cost, delivering reliability, delivering customer satisfaction, all of the things that you may have heard of around Six Sigma and operational reliability fall within this particular module. And when we cover this module, we'll go into a lot more detail on how you can constantly upgrade your skills around operations management. The final pillar is transformation. I talked earlier about why this is such a very interesting and exciting industry for us to be in, because we are becoming the transformational and change engine for CEOs, CXOs, and board leaders. This particular pillar gives you the skills required to drive change. Change management isn't always easy. There are lots and lots of factors, pro and con, when you come to any new idea. And in change management, we're going to give you several tips and tricks and models on how to approach driving change within the organization. And of course, we wrap up the entire house module with the roof, which is leadership. And leadership provides some guidance on how to go about designing an organization and how to go about winning not just one time, but perpetually as a GBS organization. So the house model is just a way of organizing some of this content so we can all be much more professional. If you happen to be from the finance industry, then there are very professional degrees and qualifications. You might be a certified public accountant. If you're a lawyer, obviously, there are similar qualifications to become a lawyer. If we in GBS are an industry in our own right, we need to have the equivalent of those degrees or diplomas or education so we can approach the challenge of GBS in a much more professional way. That's what's different about professional GBS. We give you the tips and tricks and the models on how to be more successful, much more professional. And by the way, this isn't just something that's good for you as an individual, it's equally good for your own company. The fact of the matter is that companies that use professional GBS deliver 30 to 50% more cost reductions. On top of that, they change their focus not just to be about cost, but about value creation. And value creation includes things like increasing revenue, or in the case of organizations that are nonprofits, it could be about the impact that you make to the company's mission. You are, under professional GBS, able to deliver 3 times more value than if you focused only on cost. And in many ways, the most important benefit of being professional GBS is that you become that transformational engine. You become related to the number one priority of boards of directors today, which is digital transformation. So with all of those benefits of a professional GBS organization, it's now time to put that into context of different maturity levels. You see, if you went out and talked to 50 different organizations, and if they all said we're doing GBS, the reality is that the definition of what they mean by GBS can be varied. You might get, 40 to 50 different variations. Everything from, hey, we've got, a few dozens of people doing finance together as a shared service, and that's it, right? We just do it for one country, one function, all the way through some very, very mature GBS organizations that literally drive transformational change in operating models for the entire company. They come out with new ideas and new approaches on how to, for example, win in the market, using e-commerce, or how they use artificial intelligence to completely transform the way supply chain or finance is being done. And both those extremes are correct. They are both GBS. The difference is they're just different maturity levels of GBS. You see, at stage 1 GBS, every organization starts with what is called siloed GBS or piecemeal GBS. You start with taking one function, such as finance, or one geography, maybe just the US, and creating a set of shared services, shared finance services, shared IT services, so on and so forth. This is the starting point for pretty much all GBS organizations. From there, of course, you move on to stage 2, which is global. And by the way, global doesn't have to be geographic. Global means all of the scope, all of the functions, all of the capabilities put together. Now, the thing about stage 1 and stage 2 is both those stages are still focused on cost reduction. They don't yet play in the space of driving revenue or a higher cause to the organization, or to drive more asset efficiency. How do you get more work done with the same assets? And assets could be people, or assets could be buildings, or assets could be machinery, right? Those are all additional possibilities that come with stage 3. You see, at stage 3, what you start to do is you start to focus on driving not just cost, but asset efficiency and revenue or other higher order value to the organization. At stage 3, you are hitting the needs of the stakeholders that want to drive either the stock price, or in the case of nonprofits, the total impact to the organization up by, a 2x or a 3x. Now, that's very exciting, of course, but I mentioned that we're in an industry, we are in an industry that's constantly changing. And so there is a next stage after that. At stage 4, you realize that in today's digital world, your competition isn't another company that looks like you. If you are a Procter & Gamble, your competition isn't a Unilever. If you are a Bank of America, your competition isn't a Citibank. Your competition is a startup. And startups have 10 times the agility of decision making and a 2x advantage on cost structures than large companies. And so at stage 4 GBS maturity, you start to reimagine each of these areas. You could take something like a travel and expenses services that a GBS might provide, and you could redesign it so that the expense report is no longer relevant, is no longer needed, because you can do it with artificial intelligence and data. This is an example of stage 4 maturity. All of these 4 stages are absolutely relevant. They're all GBS. They just happen to be different maturity levels of GBS. So as you can see, there is a lot of potential in this construct of GBS. We can do so much more for our individual organizations. Of course, the challenge with everything that I just said is that it's changing rapidly. The challenge with GBS, being a young industry, is that it doesn't come along with the training and the standards and certification and models as if, if you were in finance, you would actually be able to draw upon centuries of experience and training and certification. Within GBS, what tends to happen is that as most organizations create a GBS, they move people from other functions, transfer people from finance or procurement or IT, and that put together is called GBS. But of course, as you have been able to see, GBS is much more than just an aggregation of activities. GBS is all about taking all of those activities and transforming them, which means that there is a set of models and approaches that you must follow to constantly take in new work and to transform it. And that's where this particular training comes in. We want to be able to capture for you the best-in-class approaches and models that successful companies have been able to adapt and adopt over the world. Inixia has the ability to help Fortune 100 companies transform the way they run. One of the things that Filippo Passerini, my co-founder, and I have talked about constantly is that we seem to get the same questions over and over again. What is the best scope of GBS? How do you go about creating service level agreements? How do you go about, not just delivering cost, but higher value creation? And the fact of the matter is that this doesn't have to be rocket science. There are proven models which we will cover through the remaining video clips, so you can take our experience and make it yours. What these sets of proven models can do for you is to help you leapfrog your maturity. Of course, as I talked earlier, there are different levels of maturity, and everybody does start in some shape or form at stage 1. How long it takes you to go from stage 1 to a 2 to 3 to 4 is completely up to you. And that's really what professional GBS aims to bring to the party. My hope is, as you go through all of these video clips, you get a sense of the immense potential that exists in our GBS industry. There has never been a better time than now for you to be within GBS. We are associated with the number 1 priority of boards of directors. And through the remaining video clips, we will get deeper into exactly how you can approach professional GBS. Meanwhile, we hope you enjoyed this session in the Professional GBS series, and all the best as you professionalize, modernize, and transform.